What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to another Modern video. And it's been a hot minute since we've actually talked about the Modern format. I think right now we need to have a discussion. While we're not going to have any RCQs necessarily that are going to feature the Modern format, we're finishing up Standard for this month, and then in April we're going to be moving over to Pioneer, which is kind of like a weird rotation, but that's probably another video for another day. However, Modern seems like it's in a pretty rough place right now. I think there's a few things that need to change, so today we're going to talk about kind of the issue that at least I'm having with the current Modern format, and I think the format is actually having, and I don't think it's just exclusive to me. But we're going to go over that, potential changes, and things to kind of look forward to as we kind of wait until near the end of the year to have an RCQ season featuring Modern. And hopefully by the time that happens, we have a pretty diverse format yet again, compared to the one that we're currently experiencing. So, of course, before we get too deep into that, if you are not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more content like this, post a lot of Modern, Pioneer, and long-form content. So if any of that interests you, please consider subscribing to the channel and ringing the notification bell so you know when videos get posted. Also, if you go into the description down below, you'll find a link to my Discord server. Go ahead, follow that link, join over there as well. Ask me any questions about Magic, talk about it, if you have deck ideas, things like that. I would love to hear it. Absolutely love hearing other people's experiences playing the game and just how they choose to enjoy it. That's kind of been like my mantra since really kind of taking off as like a content creator, is just enjoying the game the way that you enjoy it, and I will be hypercritical of the ways that I enjoy the game. So without further ado, let's go ahead, let's get into some points and see if we can kind of solve some of the problems that the Modern format is currently having. So I think the first place to start when we want to talk about the Modern metagame is to actually look at the metagame. These are all the decks shown over the last 30 days for, Modern, for any big events, like a lot of the Modern challenges, a lot of the preliminaries and things like that. And, we see Crashing Footfalls at a 17.3%, 1,383 decks, versus the next highest, which is Yawgmoth, at 630 decks. There is over twice as many Crashing Footfall decks as there is Yawgmoth decks. As kind of like a caveat to this, a little asterisk, if you will, it does also include the Domain Rhinos list, the ones that are playing the Leyline of the Guild Pack plus the Scion of Draco combo to essentially make your Rhinos, and by extension some of your other threats, virtually unkillable while also making it impossible for your opponent to race. So I think one of the main issues, of course, is we're kind of reaching that point where we had kind of like Rakdos Evoke being, 20 to 25% of the meta, and we all knew that changes needed to take place there, and I think ultimately for the better that we see less Rakdos Scam and some of these other decks kind of at the top. But now we're kind of seeing what Rakdos Evoke was able to do, maybe at the expense of some other aggro decks. So for those of you that don't remember, we had the bannings of Fury plus Up the Beanstalk for the fact of we wanted to make aggro decks more viable in the Modern format. And while sure you could make the argument, which I don't think is a really good argument, but Crashing Footfalls and like Living End and Amulet Titan and whatever, like these other decks, like they went through combat, they are aggressive decks, they are creature beatdown decks, whatever, and that's just simply not the case. And a lot of you are going to understand for quite a bit of reasons. Obviously Footfalls is like this crazy, we're going to cascade into a spell that's either going to put 10 power into play across 3 bodies, or 10 power into play across 2 bodies, depending on which cascade spell that you cast. On top of that, too, it's really hard for aggro decks to beat, kind of like the nut draw from the Domain Rhinos, where they get to play a 4/4 with First Strike, Hexproof, Trample, Vigilance, Lifelink, whatever. Like, for one, that's hard just to race, period. Like, you're never going to kind of beat that card. Like Domain Zoo is doing the same thing as what these Domain Rhino decks are doing, and I think marginally it is better. I think, between like Brawler and the Kavu, you're able to attack into it because there are 5 power, 5 toughness things, and they'll also have presumably all the same stats and abilities, or all the same abilities, I really shouldn't say stats, as like what you're seeing from the Rhinos deck. And sure, that's like a way that you can beat through them because your things are going to have first strike. They're going to deal damage to each other. They're going to gain the life, but you're going to ultimately win combat. The tricky thing that comes to it then is when you're attacking and then they instant speed cascade into rhinos and they have, 10 power between the two of them and they can just block with one rhino. If you're attacking with two Kavus, like they block with their rhinos and stuff. Sure, like everything trades, but like you went down real cards and like you traded two of your cards for essentially two of your opponent's cards. And Rhinos, I think, all day is going to win that because, you're both going to be staring at, like, Dracos and stuff. You can even trade them off and, I prefer being on the footfall side of things rather than the, domain side of things. And domain is the main aggro deck that you're going to see in the format because it is playing very large creatures, 2 mana 5/5s, potentially 2 mana 4/4s in Scion or Draco, 1 mana 3/3s in like Wild Nacatl. It's playing the Ragavans and stuff. The only really like one toughness creature in the deck. It's playing like Brawler. I can't remember the first name of it. But it's a 2 mana 5/3, where it used to play like Tarmogoyfs and stuff like that to be like 5/6s and whatnot, which I guess in those versions of Domain Zoo, if you're going in on like the Guild Pack Scion combo, like Tarmogoyf might actually be one of the best creatures just for the fact that it does beat a Rhino straight up 1-on-1 in combat and trample over it, things like that, and actually live after a violent outburst, pump from those. Then again, they just double block, what have you. Either way, like I don't think the Domain Zoo deck can put enough pressure on the objectively best deck in the format. And that's just one side of it. The other side, you have Temur Rhinos. Temur Rhinos is obviously one of the most interactive decks that you could be playing in the format. It essentially gets to either, play Murktide Region in its deck or it gets to play Scion or Draco. Both, when things go very well, you just end up running over your opponent. That said, Temur Rhinos is obviously the more consistent of the two, while you're trying to kind of rely on having a Guild Pack, Leyline of the Guild Pact in hand and a Scion or Draco, and then being able to play it on turn 2, which obviously with the Guild Pack is going to make it a lot easier. The regular Temur Rhinos list and the Rhinos list that we've known up until really the regional championship in Denver is this super interactive, like, I'm going to be able to play through Chalice of the Void, I'm going to be able to play through engineered explosives. I'm going to be able to play through, some of your removal and what have you. And really, like, yeah, you could probably beat 1 Crashing Footfalls, maybe 2 on a good day, but you're not beating 3 or 4 of them. And even if you do, I'm going to have this 8/8 dragon that after you've 2-for-1 yourself dealing with all my rhinos, more than likely 2-for-1 yourself dealing with every single rhino that I played, I'm going to play this 2 mana 8/8, and I can follow it up with essentially another 2 mana 8/8 that is going to end up growing the first one, and it's just going to absolutely just slam the door in the game, kick you out of my house, like, don't come back, like, leave the food on the door, keep the mail in the mailbox, whatever you want to call it. Like, Footfalls is just dominant. In either way. And sure, we can make the arguments of like which one's better than Mirror, which one's better overall. Obviously, if you're going to absolutely high roll and have the best hands ever, I think that the Domain Footfalls deck is the absolute best because you can't really kill any of its threats. And even if you can, like, does it really matter? They put a ton of rhinos into play and they essentially have like this extra protection behind Leyline of the Guild Pack because you have to take out the Guild Pack to get rid of hexproof on all the creatures. Which is really rough because, Rakdos Scam put you in the same position where you need to draw, essentially, multiple removal spells because they're just going to be able to take the removal spells out of your hand or take the creatures out of your hand that would actually block the Rakdos creature, or the Grief, and, just hope that you can top deck well enough to actually be able to interact with it or play something that resembles a game of Magic. And while Crashing Footfalls, makes the game feel like it's over, kind of in the same way that Rakdos Scam makes the game feel like it's over. And again, while there are some decks kind of like the Crashing Footfalls decks, mainly the Domain versions, then you have like Living End, who could actually, interact decently well because it has a board wipe that's not going to target. Amulet Titan, I would imagine, probably struggles decently given some of the other disruption that the Domain version gets to play. And then for Temur Rhinos, it's probably pretty like 50-50. I would say, again, getting to interact with them and then also put pressure on them is super key in those things. But it just kind of makes the format unfun. If you know that like 18% of the time you're going to be playing against Rhinos and you're going to play against it 2 or 3 times, and you're something like a Yawgmoth, you're like an Amulet Titan, what have you, some of these other decks, even like a Domain Zoo deck playing against like Living End too, like that's just rough. I mean, yeah, sure, you have Kavu, who's going to be able to eat creatures, but then, if Living End's just on the play, like you just play it, say go, and then they go, cycle, third land, Shardless Agent, kill your Kavu, bring all these things back. Well, now if you just play another one, like sure, you're probably going to beat a lot of the creatures in combat, but you're not going to win the game overall because they're just going to bring back even, 15, 18 power into play. And sure, you can take 5 of it off the board, but you still take 13, and you have to be able to stop at least another, 7 power coming through, and blocking a 1/5 power creature only puts you, only leaves it at 8, and with all of the other creatures and stuff that can give them, bigger power, and trample on top of that too, it's not really ideal, having to beat through Living End as kind of like an aggro deck, and again, this is theoretically one of the most aggressive aggro decks that you could be playing, simply for the fact that it is good to play 2 mana 5/5s, 2 mana 4/4s, 1 mana 3/3s, and 2 mana 5/3, whatever. Like 5 power creatures on turn 2, should a lot of the time be good enough. Because we've been conditioned that 3 mana for 10 power has been like amazing. So like 2 mana for 5 should be like pretty good. But yeah, like a lot of the format, even though like the Temur version of Rhinos is fine, I think they're being kind of like a deck that a lot of the time they would just kind of, 2 ships passing the night, they would look by their opponent. Living End is, essentially like game 1, just looking to run their opponent over, and then game 2 and game 3, hope to draw maybe like a hate piece or 2, or to counteract the hate against them, and then kind of go off with one big Living End that is just going to absolutely just end the game. Like there's no question about it. You're not going to have to do this dance where you do a small one to get rid of your opponent's board, and then like doing a bigger one to kind of like negate the fact that they are going to get something back, or find ways to get rid of the stuff that they could have coming back and what have you. But they can just do one big one and the game is over. So I think problem 1, and it's a long problem 1 with obviously a lot of other detail kind of like sprinkled in there for everything else. I think Crashing Footfalls, Temur Rhinos is fine. I think Domain Rhinos is a little bit of a problem. I think Living End has kind of always been a problem, but I think especially now it's almost a necessity to have it exist in play when, you have Crashing Footfalls that has like a mode to it, at least, in the Domain version, where you can't use any of your targeted removal on the creatures until you get rid of the Leyline of the Guild Pact. And even then, like, there's some scenarios where your opponent can just counter it, playing like Force Negation, can kind of take you off enough mana with like Fire Ice, and then eventually just like, again, on that one turn, that one critical turn where you need to get rid of it, and they can just stop you from doing it. They can just slam the door shut on you, and then like that's it. You're getting hit for 12 or 15, and then they're gaining 15 life. Like, it almost doesn't matter at that point, because you're just more than likely not going to be able to come back from that unless you're something like a Living End, or you just kind of have like the ultra nuts like Yawgmoth draw or Amulet Titan draw. And it definitely makes Modern feel like it has to be a faster format for the fact that you are going to either actually die or theoretically die, on like turn 3, turn 4 of the format. And like the fact that you think that you have to kill on like turn 3 to be able to like win, it just doesn't really create an environment that really like I want to be a part of, and really like what other players really want to see. I mean, obviously, again, I've prefaced this whole start of this video with the fact that we're not going to see Modern RCQs really probably until like August. If it kind of follows like the same pattern, that Standard's doing to Pioneer, I'm assuming Pioneer to Modern, we're not going to see anything until August. So kind of like with that long-winded explanation and everything, what do we need to see change to the Modern metagame? I think to put Modern in a pretty good position to be a fun, playable format that people care about before RCQ season. And obviously, like for Magic Online players, like there's always like Modern challenges and so on. So like there's always like a reason theoretically to care about it. But for people to care about like paper Modern going forward, I think we need to see the Violent Outbursts just get banned. I think Instant Speed Cascade, whether you're casting a Crashing Footfalls, whether you're casting a Living End, is just, it's bad. I think it kind of, forces your opponent to play around in like a way that they don't necessarily want to play. I think if you leave it sorcery speed, a lot of the decks are playing, Force of Negation. I think just having a way to cut off access for them having Force of Negation on the turn that they want to combo, because they can do it on your end step, and then you can't Force of Negation them, but they can Force of Negation your card. And even if you do get to like counter their thing and then like untap, like they just play another like Charlotte's Agent, whatever, and that's kind of like where you're forced to Force a Negation. But if they just have access to it, it's like it's a non-issue for them. Like it just doesn't matter. So I think you need to get rid of Violent Outburst as a whole, period, point blank. Let them play at sorcery speed. There's people that talked about playing like Ardent Plea, which is essentially like a 3-mana enchantment with Cascade that has Exalted. So, and I've heard some issues where people are like, oh, well, then people will just get to play main deck, Leyline Binding and things like that. And it's like, honestly, it wouldn't be anything new from, Rhinos, because there have been Rhinos versions before that were playing like 80 cards that were doing something like very briefly. But I think like Team of Rhinos definitely proved that it was like one of the better decks, and it doesn't need Leyline Binding to be very good. And I still think that that's not the case either. I think the deck does obviously get worse because you do have to kind of build into a fourth color. Not like it really matters, because we literally have 5-color versions of Footfalls that are still casting Scions on turn 2. So if they're able to cast a Scion on turn 2, and they're still able to play like Leyline of the Guildpact, like maybe you have like the multicolored, the 5-color Rhinos decks end up being like very good. So I think from there, you probably ban like Leyline of the Guildpact. While, we've proven that we're fine with like banning cards that come out relatively soon, it's definitely not a good business practice to like push cards that end up being very good and finding ways to be kind of staples in the format if there's like, for a few decks, and then banning it, a few months after the set releases and the card is able to be played in the format. Is definitely not a good practice. But for like the health of the format, for people to really care about the format and stuff going forward, I think Leyline of the Guildpact probably has to go, kind of like in this order of like Crashing Footfalls, like Leyline of the Guildpact. And I think going even further, I think I would like to just see Grief like go away. Like Grief get banned. I would like to see, really those three are like the big ones to me. Rakdos Scam really doesn't see play, but I also think that free discard, especially for like Living End 2 could probably like fit into this like Ardent Plea, or like go play like Demonic Dread or whatever, and then we have like just, essentially Jund Living End, and like people are still wanting to play creatures. Like you see like the Yawgmoth deck, you just need to be able to target something, and Footfalls is probably still going to be a pretty good deck, what have you. So, like, there's probably going to be ways that you can, like, target something in, like, this current meta and everything. And I think that if you force them to play, like, Demonic Dread, Creature Can't Block, Cascade Bubble, whatever, like, that's totally fine. Because, again, it's just another sorcery speed way of cascading. And that's kind of where I would, like, start to have changes. And, I don't think those are, like, super crazy changes to make like in the now, like within like the next month or two. If that happens, I think that will be overall a good thing. You're going to give the meta time to kind of adjust a little bit more, like give it a little bit more time, while the format isn't, I guess, super miserable, like unplayable miserable. And then, after a month or two, like, okay, like nothing's changed, ban those cards, and then you have Modern Horizons 3 coming out, and then you have the Assassin's Creed Universes Beyond Modern set that's going to be coming out also this year as well. So you definitely have 2 sets that are going to make an impact. Of course, you have all the other standard sets where cards could potentially make an impact on the format. And you end up nerfing, the 2, I guess by extension 3 of the best decks in the format in both variants of Crashing Footfalls and Living End. And you kind of give these creature decks a little bit more to like play with. And I think that's kind of like the main thing. If you are going to make a previous ban announcement to try to improve the health of the format, to make creature decks more viable, and the only creature deck that you really made more viable, which I don't think it really even needed it, but it was definitely very helpful, was Yawgmoth. And like the Domain Zoo decks definitely got a push from the combo of Leyline of the Guildpact, Scion of Draco. But so did every other deck, like the best deck in the format also just got an upgrade for it, and it's just absolutely, it's crazy. The format right now is I think on the verge of kind of like collapsing. You know, again, you need to make people care about this format. I think you need to have people care about standard, pioneer, and modern, because clearly that's going to be like the rotation of the RCQs and stuff like that. So I think at all times you have to make people care about the format, and the best way to do that is to continue to be proactive, definitely utilize those windows after standard set releases and set releases period, where you monitor the health of the format, you see anything that's kind of like unhealthy, and kind of go from there. I kind of wish Goldfish, and this is just kind of like a side of all this, I wish Goldfish would kind of separate the Team of Rhinos list from the 5-color Rhinos list so we could get like an accurate representation of it. But, you know, that said, it doesn't really, to me, it doesn't really matter. You know, they're essentially like the same archetype. You have almost 17.5% of people playing Crouching Footfalls, you know, and when we know the power of the deck, you know, a lot of the time stems from just being able to do it on your opponent's end step, hit your opponent for 8, play a Shardless Agent, put more power into play. Like, you've put 16 power into play, or really 18 power into play in like a turn cycle. You know, by the time it gets back to your opponent's turn, they're staring down 16 power worth of trample and 18 power total, you know, on their 4th turn of the game. And that is pretty, I mean, it's pretty hard to come back from. It's pretty hard for a lot of decks to beat that. You know, and then on top of that too, their new combo and everything is just absolutely bonkers. So for me, I would start with getting rid of the Violent Outburst. I'd force them to kind of play at sorcery speed if they wanted to do kind of these broken things, or get very creative when it comes to trying to play at instant speed. And then from there, you know, just kind of make some other cuts that will kind of improve aggro decks, and not just like you have to be playing 2-mana 5/5s or 2-mana 4/4s, or you just absolutely have 0 chance. And I think you need to have, you know, the creature decks kind of come back. You need to have something like Noble Hierarch and Ignoble Hierarch be playable in your format. You need to have something like a Birds of Paradise. You know, those things aren't necessarily bad, you know, and while we have some really good 2 toughness dorks like in Delighted Halfling, I think that overall we need those cards to at least be decent in the format, at least be playable, you know, instead of just like, what's the most broken combo? Okay, we're going to play it, we're going to master it, and what have you. I think you can still have those exist, but overall, I think you still need to make some changes to kind of improve the wantingness for players to make those changes. And yeah, that's my thoughts on the modern format. I think that's something that needs to change. We can kind of reevaluate things as kind of we continue to go forward, and we get some more results from like challenges and preliminaries and maybe other modern tournaments hosted by other, you know, in-person events and things like that. And reevaluate from there, plus with the release of Modern Horizons 3, because Modern Horizons 3 has done a very good job of, you know, revamping old archetypes and then also creating new ones in the format as well. You know, so it's kind of been the status quo for the last 2. The third one, I don't see being any different. You know, starting off with a bang with like the fetch lands and Emrakul and things like that, and some of the other free spells that we're going to be able to see going forward. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the format over the next few months, because I think a lot of what's going to set up the modern RCQ season for success is doing the work right now to make the format enjoyable and to make people want to play it and care about it. You know, just as it's been forever when we've had standard PBTQs and, you know, other formats that have had qualifiers for Pro Tour level events or regional championships, what have you. People still cared about modern and wanted them to be modern, and I think that's what you want. You want players to want a good format to be the format that they all play because of, you know, for whatever reason, if it's fun to play, people want to play it. So we need to get modern back to that point, because I think Pioneer and Standard are in some pretty decent spots to just, you know, have fun games of Magic happen and just overall fun to play. So that's going to do it for me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like on the video. Of course, comment down below if there's any changes that you would make to the modern format to make it a little bit more enjoyable. Of course, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you know when future videos get posted. Follow the link down in the description below to my Discord server. I'll even link the modern metagame page as well to Goldfish, just because, again, I think this is a great tool to help players that are, you know, trying to get into playing competitively, understand kind of like metagame percentages and look at different deck lists and see common cards and what have you. Just kind of prepare for your next tournament and things like that. So that's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.